Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Tai'Shar, and a Wheel of Time podcast. I am Will.
I'm Sam.
We're excited to be working on the second quarter of The Dragon Reborn today. Sam is leading us through this book. So, Sam, why don't you take it away?
Sure. So let's dive back into chapter 16. I'm just going chapter by chapter because why not? I don't have a whole lot from this chapter other than Egwene swoons over Galad. And once again, Elaine tells Egwene that her half-brother, is a creep, and then tries to set her up with Elaine's other brother.
Yes.
Gawain instead. And really the only other point of this chapter is that Nynaeve, after the Amyrlin seat swears them to secrecy, says, "Tell no one about me making you my hounds." Nynaeve brings Elaine immediately into the fold, which is the right thing to do. And we can understand why Swan decided not to include Elaine because her mother is more gays. It was a whole thing. But you kind of figure the Amyrlin seat expected that to happen.
Yes.
I think she even says something to that effect later. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth about that, but they bring Elaine up to speed on what they've been tasked to do, and of course Elaine is all in. They kick Galad and Gawain out of Nynaeve's room. I think Galad and Gawain were kind of wanting to escort Elaine back to Caemlyn, perhaps, or just help somehow. Anyway, they're kind of unceremoniously kicked out. Then moving on, chapter 17, and the only thing I have is chapter 17, in which we once again see that Elaida is an unpleasant person.
Yes, absolutely. That's a nice way of putting it.
I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, there's just not a whole lot that happens. It's just Elaida being just generally kind of awful. Yeah, I think kind of unpleasant.
I think it's the Egwene who says if she's not Black Aja, she's the next thing to it.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. That's a great characterization of Elaida. It's like, I don't care if she's evil or not. She's just mean.
Yeah, she's just an unpleasant, just awful person. We get more with Sheriam, which we talked about last episode, so we don't need to get into that. But sure. There was a little bit more of that. And then chapter 18 is just, the title is Healing, and it is in which Mat is healed by a circle of Aes Sedai to separate him from the dagger from Shadar Logoth. While being healed, Mat yells in the Old Tongue, and at some point, someone, I think it's Varen or the Amyrlin seat, says, I think he was ordering soldiers, or he was giving orders to soldiers. Like, it's interesting. They talk about how strong the old blood still is. It's interesting because the fact that he can speak the Old Tongue just because of his blood, and it gets back to probably the wheel and reincarnation aspects. I get that he later, this is a brief spoiler, he gets more memories, from another reason, and it's a more direct and more clear implication as to how he came to possess memories from other people, how he could speak the Old Tongue. But it seemed as though he could speak the Old Tongue without knowing it before all that happened, just by being from Manetheren.
Yes, I went through that too. Well, it's a little unclear if it was something to do with the dagger, or if it was something to do.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. That's a good point.
With the healing that awakened, as you say, like his previous life, the whole reincarnation business, kind of it drawing previous lives out of him as they're doing the healing. And
sure. I think that's a good point. Yeah, it's sort of intentionally left vague, as a good many things in this series are, and that's okay. It is interesting to think about and kind of reason about like what exactly the root causes of things are. And I would imagine in Jordan's head, he probably knew at least what his intention was. But I think he intentionally left some things a little bit vague, and that's okay. Yeah. So they separate him from the dagger, and then they just kind of put it in a box, put it on a shelf somewhere. Yeah, which is kind of funny to me.
Just hope for the best, I guess.
Yeah. Well, they're like, the White Tower is secure. We don't need to worry about it. It's not like there's dark friends here or anything. So then we actually get a Mat perspective chapter. Makes sense that it would be the first one of this book because he was unconscious and near death until the Aes Sedai healed him.
Have we any Mat perspective chapters before this in the whole series?
Oh, I don't know.
This may be the first Mat perspective chapter in the entire series.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Because I don't think we get a perspective. I think it's Rand's perspective.
Yeah, a lot.
With Matt in Eye of the World. And I think that it's pretty much Aaron's perspective any time that we're not with Rand in The Great Hunt.
You're right. That's exactly right. Nope. Yeah. Props to you. The Dragon Reborn, chapter 19. All right. So that's it. That did not occur to me for one moment, but you're right.
Well, it wouldn't have occurred to me, except I thought about how much I didn't like Matt early on.
And it was because we didn't have his perspective.
Exactly. And so this whole time we were just thinking, oh, I just don't like this guy. And then we hear from his perspective and we're like, hey, this guy's kind of fun. You know?
Yeah, sure. And it gets back to the point I made last episode where it's like, I thought Rand seemed like a totally different character. But no, it was just because it was from Perrin's perspective. And Rand was this whole other entity as, a man who can channel, who's the Dragon Reborn, who's also his friend from childhood. Who accidentally almost brought a mountain down on his head. So it's like we get a different view of someone when it's not their perspective. Absolutely, right. That's a good point. So it starts with a flashback. We get a flashback to a life when he commanded the Manetheren Heart Guard, which I thought was a pretty cool name. He was the commander of the Manetheren Heart Guard.
But it also like something I would have to give my dog once a month to. Make sure that he doesn't get heartworms.
That's a fair point as well.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that is what it's called.
Fair point. I guess I'm a crappy dog owner and that I have not been giving that to my dog. I should be.
Oh, well, probably give something else like Trifexis or one of the other, or the shot ones.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, probably is a shot one. But we also get a mention to the fact that he was a gambler in that life as well. So it does suggest to me that it's not just the old blood talking through him, and maybe this is what they mean anyway. But it does suggest to me that it is a previous life of Max, that he was the commander of the Manetheren Heart Guard, for example.
Right.
So that. It's, because he's a gambler, there's a lot of similarities to him in that. And then he proceeds to eat a ton because of the healing, which is it's always fun. They like bring out a giant platter of food. I'm just imagining like a whole turkey,
Right.
and he eats the whole thing. I will say that one thing I was thinking about after we had our discussion of the cast announcements, I do imagine Barney Harris, after having seen him and like that's the only one of the casting announcements that I can say honestly, like now that I've seen him, I sort of do. Maybe it was just the fact that they cast someone who looks like what I imagined, right. But I do imagine him. So I think they did a really good job. In casting. Matt.
Here we also do find out that Matt has holes in his memory.
Very good point, and that was explicitly from the dagger. He like imagines basically all of the Great Hunt as just like a dream. Like, did that happen? Did that really happen? Like, was I drunk?
And at the end of this chapter, the thing he remembers suddenly is that I blew the horn of Valir. Like he had forgotten about
good point. Very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And of course, that is the reason why the Aes Sedai don't want him to leave. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Or probably a major part of why they don't want him to leave.
I do think it's interesting. Matt's memory loss is it's kind of like a shock therapy thing. Like if you've ever heard from anybody who's had a lot of shock therapy to treat a mental illness, that parts of their memory tend to become fuzzy as a result, as a side effect of it. And so it's kind of like that's what happened to him, but like magically.
That's good. That's interesting. All right. So then Matt gets a visit from Lanfear. It's not explicitly Lanfear, but we know it is. I mean, at this point, we definitely know.
It's Selene, and we at this point we know that is Lanfear.
She essentially seems like she wants to control him since he blew the horn of Valir, and probably for his connection to Rand. But it's interesting that Lanfear is the first person that comes in to see him after he wakes up. It's like, how the heck did she know that he'd woken up? Because right after she leaves, the Amyrlin seed walks in. And so it does seem as though Lanfear is in the tower, knows things. She is aware of what is happening. She leaves. Amyrlin comes in with Lyanna to tell him he's going nowhere. and that he's linked to the Horn of Valir. And it's like, I don't know if he knew exactly that. So he knew that he blew it. Did he know that no one else could blow it?
Not yet. Yeah.
Right. So that was something he finds out, and really what she succeeds in doing is convincing Matt that he has to get the heck out of there as fast as possible.
Right.
Really the opposite of what she was probably going for, I would say.
There's a funny line in there where she reveals to him, once somebody has blown the horn, they're the only ones who can blow it again and get the same effect until they
die. Yeah.
And he said, "So you kept me alive just so I can blow the horn in the last battle?" And he's like, "Would you rather us have let you die?"
Right.
And then he thinks about it for a second, and he's like, "Oh, well, no.
No, I would not."
Yeah. So he's like, "Well, okay. So if you want me to blow the horn, I'll blow the horn."
Right. Whatever you want to hear, man. I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm at your service. Stand ready as it is. So that's the essentially what happened there. Then we go back to Egwene, and this is a really fun scene. She goes to see, of course, Varen has her like lair in the library of the tower, and she just has like a little mini library. But she has an owl. She has like a pet owl.
Yeah,
which is fun. You don't get a lot of animals like that, of familiars in the series. Not like Harry Potter or whatever. There's a few that show up a lot. Like Bella is one that shows up constantly. But
most of them are horses.
Yeah, right. Yeah, horses with various names. But Varen has an owl. Not really sure why. In other series, owls are the messengers, like in Harry Potter, for example.
You mentioned mice away because the mice chew up paper, and of course, her being a brown sister,
for sure, paper is very important.
Paper. Yeah, very important.
But she also has a bunch of Trollocs, or a bunch of skulls. One of which is a Trolloc skull, which is sort of strange. And Egwene is sort of suspicious for a moment. But because Varen has so much information. I mean, Varen has a list of the Black Aja. It's just like, and so Egwene has this moment of, ooh, should I trust her? But then she actually explicitly says, "I trust you, Varen. We've been through a lot together." Varen proceeds to talk to her about Teleron Riyadh and about the Black Aja. She gives Egwene the twisted stone ring. That is how Egwene, of course, gets into the world of dreams.
I just want to say this about the ring, because I didn't catch this in my first reading. It says it only has one edge. And at first I was like, what does that even mean? It's a Mobius strip.
Okay.
It's a stinking Mobius strip, which was recently made popular in Avengers Endgame when Tony is trying to render different models to make time travel. He just throws out, render it in the shape of a Mobius strip. It's a 3D object that has only one side, and kind of in theory. And so that's what if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. Mobius
I
strip.
just did. I immediately, when you said that, thought of Morbius, who is the vampire villain / not villain from Spider-Man that Jared Leto is going to play in an ill-advised movie. Anyway, that's an aside. but there was a few more little tidbits there. Varen, this is kind of funny. Varen mentions the warp and woof of the weave. I didn't know. That kind of threw me for a second, the warp and woof. But apparently that is the bidirectional state of threads, like the threads running against each other.
Oh, okay.
I had to Google that, but I just had never seen woof used in a sentence like that before.
I Googled it, and it's that whole pattern in like knitting where you have the back and forth and the up and down.
I never knew woof was anything other than what a dog would say, but here we are. She also makes an interesting observation that there are many worlds, and the Dark One is imprisoned in them all. Yeah. But that it's a bit of a conundrum, because it's like the Dark One is imprisoned in them all, but if he's released in any of them, his shadow will fall across all of them, which is an interesting little kind of analogy. There was let's see,
multiverse theory confirmed.
Yeah. So she says, Egwene says, in all of them, how can that be? Are you saying there's a father of lies for each world? And Varen says, "No, child, there is one creator who exists everywhere at once for all of these worlds. In the same way, there is only one dark one who exists in all these worlds at once. If he is freed from the prison the creator made in one world, he is freed on all. So long as he is kept prisoner in one, he remains prisoned in all." And that does not make, she says, it doesn't seem to make sense. "Paradox, child. The dark one is the embodiment of paradox and chaos, the destroyer of reason and logic, the breaker of balance, the unmaker of order." And then the owl flies away. Anyway, so then she goes on to talk a little bit about Tai'Shar Riyadh and how it's and she said in the old tongue that means the unseen world, which I wasn't aware. I didn't realize that's what it meant. That was interesting. So Egwene leaves Varen's little lair and goes to become accepted. Didn't realize she was going to, but I guess it's kind of like a hazing ritual, like pledging a fraternity. Like, it's going to happen right now at midnight. You're not ready, and that's the point.
Yeah, it's kind of a bad situation for her because she's just got to walk straight in there. She's got a list of the Black Aja,
and she has the stone ring, which is important.
Yes, and both of which she wouldn't want people to discover she has. So.
Right. And also, when she gets there, Alana, and I don't know if this is the first time. Probably not the first time we've seen Alana. Anyway, Alana says, it could be. It could be. Says that there's a resonance with the Tyriangreal that novices walk through to become accepted. But she just says it's kind of like a bite me, like just a little buzz in my ear. I don't know what it is, but we'll just continue. It's okay.
I love Elida's comment after she says, is there anything wrong? I won't proceed if there's anything wrong. And she's like, no, I don't think so. And Elida says, maybe somebody else would have think it wasn't worth mentioning.
I love it.
And it's like, why did you even say anything about it?
It's just like, you just want to say, thanks, Karen.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, man. So then we get Egwene walking through the Tyriangreal, and this gets back to the same experience that Nynaeve went through to become accepted, where it's debatable about whether or not this is a real universe. And I thought about this a lot. Like, okay, it's different from, say, the portal stones that Rand and Varen and them walk through, because it seems like the world is actively trying to keep them there. It's like bringing them to an exact moment in time where they would most care about what's happening in this other world, and then asking them to abandon that. And so I could still see it going either way, where either this is an alternate universe or it's just in their head, it's just imaginary. But the interesting thing to me about it is that they immediately seem to have all of the memories associated with that alternate world and momentarily forget who they are and what they're really doing there.
Yeah.
It seems to have, especially, so the first one is Egwene has a baby with Rand, and Rand is losing his mind. He doesn't realize he can channel Dragon Reborn, etc. The second one, they're fighting in Camelin in the palace, and she could save Rand, but she can't. The third one, though, is the most interesting to me. The third one in which Egwene is Amerlin seat. She has a keeper of the chronicles named Beldine, I believe. Anyway,
Beldine, yeah.
She stands in front of the tower, in front of the sitters, and Rand is brought in for her to render judgment. And essentially, it's made to seem as though Elida is of the Black Aja, possibly in this dream.
Yeah.
And she's being turned to the shadow by the 13 sisters and Murdral and all. And it's it's as if Egwene is immediately in the moment and knows what's happening, knows what the, kind of all the backstory and history of what's happening of being Amerlin seat, until she sees the gateway. And then she remembers, oh crud, this isn't who I am. I'm supposed to go. And, of course it tears her apart, but it is interesting. It is an interesting kind of different. It's different from Tai'Shar Riyadh. It's different from the Portal Stones, but it could be real.
Yeah, there is something about it that is definitely related to Tai'Shar Riyadh that gets into when she gets out, and of course they have the trouble that Alana detected. they finally eventually say something about, well, the only time I've ever seen something like this is when two ter'angreal of a similar use were nearby.
So maybe her trip through the accepted ter'angreal was a little bit messed up.
Right.
Because maybe she was in Tel'aran'rhiod or something like it because of the resonance between her twisted ring and the portal Tyrann, whatever it's called. I don't know.
There definitely is something that is related to the idea of Tel'aran'rhiod and kind of being related also to possible alternate realities and everything. I think just because it's removed from the main reality, we discover some things about it later. And again, some of this is all like, how much of it did Robert Jordan really have planned out?
Sure, absolutely. I think that's a fair question. I mean, I think he had some things really clear in his head. He had a full outline, but he hadn't fleshed in maybe all the details.
Right.
Especially maybe not the details of how Tel'aran'rhiod should work. So then, we continue where after Egwene, of course, is raised to accept it. And this is when Elida comes up and talks to her, and Egwene thinks to herself, if she isn't Black Aja, she's the next thing to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. And Sheriam, or Alana, actually, after her kind of messing up about the ter'angreal, the resonance, says she wants to go to Sheriam and I guess be whipped or whatever, which is kind of a funny image. Yeah, to be punished. And Sheriam's like kind of mortified, like, what? Why? No, don't.
Right.
You're an Aes Sedai. But the Emerald Seat says, yeah, you can do it. Just keep it quiet. Basically you can't have an Aes Sedai
makes Egwene suspicious. Right. Because she's wondering if Alana is doing this to keep an eye on her.
Sure, somehow. Right. To be in the kitchens with her. Yeah, that makes sense.
But she also asks her about the Green Aja. And we do learn.
Good for bringing that up.
We do learn two things from her trips to these alternate. We learn about the fact that it with 13.
Yes,
people.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah,
that's where we find it out. She comes out of the ring
because it almost happened to her essentially.
Right.
And it's a really strange concept. I wanted to talk about this a little more. It's like, okay, so they say 13 Dreadlords, Black Sisters, and 13 channeling through 13 Murdral. So the idea of channeling through Murdral is weird.
Yeah,
can turn someone to the shadow, but what exactly does that mean? Like, suddenly they're like, I want to serve the Great Lord. Like, it's just like, are they brainwashed? Are they just in servitude? Like, it doesn't. I don't know if I don't think it ever actually happens in the series.
It does. It does in the last trilogy, and in fact,
that'd be why I didn't remember.
Yes,
fair enough.
Actually, I think it may be a Memory of Light before we actually see it happen. I think it may be the very last book where we see it happen. And I'm sorry I didn't give a spoiler warning, but I think
that's fine.
It's a vague enough thing.
It's good to know that it actually does happen. I literally don't remember it, so I will look forward to rereading that section.
Well, and I will say when we get to that, I'd like to talk about it more because I'm a little bit like you. I feel like even then it's not developed as to what exactly
what the implications are. Sure.
Right. Yeah.
Harry Potter is what I first think of, like the Imperius or Chrysaid, whichever one puts somebody Imperius curse that makes someone, they're like kind of brainwashed. They're like not brainwashed. They're just forced to do whatever you tell them to do, even though they don't want to. Yeah. So I don't know if it's like that or if it's more like a brainwashing.
Or if it's more like the way that vampires work in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where they talk about once
they just sort of become evil.
Once a person becomes a vampire, they're not themselves anymore. A demon inhabits their body, and basically they become a completely different person with that person's appearance and memories, but they're really
different personality. And
right.
I just remember from the original Buffy movie, guys like, you're floating, man, you're floating. Anyway,
dude, I've never watched the movie. Because
it's not good.
Yeah, well, Joss hated it. So Joss.
Oh, really? I don't think I knew that. Interesting.
Oh no, yeah. He part of the reason why he made the show was because he had just had two really terrible experiences selling scripts that he was passionate about, And both of them, he said, just went horribly. And so he started making the Buffy show so he would have full control over one of his screenplays.
Love it.
Then, of course, he went on to direct Avengers.
Indeed, he did. And Justice League, which I'm sure he'd like to forget.
Yeah, well, he directed the last, what was left.
Wasn't his fault.
Yeah, wasn't. We can't blame all
right.
of that.
He salvaged that as much as he could. No,
right.
Definitely can't blame that on him.
Yeah.
So, and then we're back to Matt again, another Matt perspective, this is a fun chapter. He is scheming to. I'm sorry. Did you have more to add there? I apologize.
Sorry, I distracted myself.
Please do. No, please do.
I was just going to add. It's here when talking to Alana that Egwene asks Alana about the Green Aja. She says, "What does it mean to be Green Aja?" And
I love her immediate response.
And yeah, Alana's
you need to love men.
Yes. She says, yeah. You have to love men, not just like men,
and not hate men like the Reds,
right?
And not think in dispassionate logic like the Whites with a glance toward, I think it was Alvier and said,
yeah. I think she's kind of like the only white sister we really get to know, ironically.
Sure. Yeah, I think you're right. At least until the Salidar.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. But but that's when we find out that the Green, their responsibility, which up to this point we're like, they're flirty. They
have a bunch of warders. Yeah.
We don't really get a clear picture of, like, at this point we do already know, well, the Browns are bookish and like research, and we already know, we've just been told that the Whites are about logic. We know the Yellows are about healing, and Blues are about causes, and Reds, of course, are about tracking down men who can channel. But the only thing, and we know about Greens, they've been talking about them, but we didn't have a clear picture of what their thing was until she says that they are the Battle Aja, that their deal is fighting in wars as the primary defense against dreadlords. Right. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, and then it kind of makes sense.
Then it makes sense that you would want to have a bunch of warders.
Exactly, because you would be in battle. So not just because you were this flirty. It became a very different picture in my head of what the Green Aja was from that point on. I was like, oh, okay. And also why Egwene might end up being in the Green Aja.
For sure. No, it's funny because immediately thereafter, we get the Matt chapter where Gawain and Galad are out practicing with the warder trainees. And there's a whole bunch of Aes Sedai and accepted and novices and cooks and servants and all the women just ogling Galad because apparently he's a pretty man. Yes.
I think I saw asked on the Wheel of Time subreddit, somebody asked, what unimportant scene do you really hope to see played out? And I saw several people say this scene.
Yes, I agree wholeheartly. That is a very good idea. This is a fun scene because Matt is still pretty weak from being healed. He's kind of shaky in the knees. He tries to leave. He goes to talk to the guards at the border of the city. And they're all like, no, we have your name and face. You're not going anywhere, buddy. So he's kind of crestfallen. And then he goes and finds the warders fighting and training in the yard. And he challenges Galad and Gawain together to fight him. So they're using wooden practice swords. He gets a quarterstaff, which is, I always think of a bow staff,
right?
Like a thicker bow staff. But he honestly just wants money. He's like, I need money to be able to get out of here. So that's like the extent of his thought. And he's thinking, my luck is in. And so Gawain and Galad are sputtering like, no, we would never. You're still sick. They're the warder trainer. His name is Her something. That's such an H. His name escapes me. Kind of walks up and says, "Take the wager. You should do it." So they're like, "Okay, fine. Let's get this farce over with." I think Galad says something to that effect. And then Matt totally whips up on him.
Yeah.
His whole thing was, if you can just thump me one good time, I'll give in. Otherwise, I'm just going to whip up on you. And so he just basically knocks them both out. It's an excellent scene. It's really cool. And then, of course, all the Aes Sedai and everyone huddle around Galad and stare daggers at Matt. And Matt, meanwhile, was like holding on to his staff, like barely able to stand. Like, I just imagine him swaying a little bit. And Gawain, who had been knocked out but gets up and is okay, somebody heals him, walks up and is gracious in defeat. and pretty much says, "Oh, well, I'll never challenge you like that again. That was pretty great." The teacher says, "Who is the greatest swordsman of all time?" And they all say some guy's name. I don't know. And they're like, and he says, he was only defeated one time by a farmer with a quarterstaff. You all remember it, which is great. It's
I'm
all
glad
around
you brought that up.
fun. Just a fun scene. Just so like it was all sort of an object lesson. Matt was just there for the money, but the teacher of the warders was trying to teach him a little bit of a lesson. I'm going to look his name up.
Now, here was the question I had about this scene. I love the whole scene. I love the whole business of Matt whooping up on him. I love the whole funny thing of afterwards, all the Aes Sedai following around it. I did have I wondered though, of course, there's a little bit of this thing that we talked about with Rand and his business of being a blade master after 2 books.
Right.
Matt suddenly beating 2 trained boys with a quarterstaff. Now, I mean, what you're saying about it being a lesson and everything does make sense. But the part of the way that, of course, it all justifies is he did bet on it.
He did. Right. So it's the gambler, the luck coming in. But I think also maybe this was a little easier for me to swallow. The luck is part of it. But also because the implication is he was raised doing this. Abel Cawthon was teaching him how to use a quarterstaff, as opposed to Rand, who had never touched a sword until the beginning of the first book. It reminds me of the Two Rivers, longbowmen snipers. Yeah. Apparently everyone in the Two Rivers is a sniper. Maybe everyone in the Two Rivers is also really good with a quarterstaff. I don't know.
Yeah.
That would be and honestly, maybe that's why Rand takes to the sword so well, because he was already trained with a quarterstaff. It's a possibility. Right. Headcanon, perhaps even. But I think you're right. I think that this is as much luck as it is anything else, and Matt's luck is in.
This is also the chapter where we get the line that you mentioned in our very first episode that you like so much.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yes. Yeah. That hunger ate at Matt as if he had eaten weasels or something.
Yes, indeed. It's an image.
At yeah,
as if he had swallowed weasels. Indeed.
Yes.
So that was...
It happens more than once while he's there. It's just like that he was extremely hungry while he's fighting these guys. They really, for some reason, Jordan really wanted to drive that home.
So there's at least one other little scene in here, and I'll reference him briefly and bring it up again later. He sees Elsie Grinwell on the path, and she just does not want to talk to him. And he's very confused because she seems so nice. He and Rand encountered her at the farmhouse, wherever that was. And he's very confused, and it seems like a pointless scene until later, which we will get into that. I don't want to get into it now. So then we get back to Egwene and Teleron Riyadh. And so I think this is where I was talking about. We have like 2 pages of just massive amounts of foreshadowing.
Yeah, on the fandom wiki, there's a list of all of the different things that she sees. The Shan-Chan collaring a long line of women who wore great serpent rings, forcing them to attack the White Tower. White cloaks binding her father's hands. Rand reaching for a crystal sword. Rand kneeling while many little dragons settle on his skin. Rand walking into a hole in a mountain. Rand confronting the Shan-Chan. Perrin with a female falcon on his shoulder, with a hawk trying to leash him. Perrin with a beard leading a pack of wolves. Matt
I love that detail. It's like, with a beard, ! Like, that's such a big deal.
Yes. And Matt placing his left eye on a balance scale, and Matt hanging by his neck from a tree limb. Matt and the Shan-Chan, and Matt speaking the old tongue.
It's funny because how much of that is not metaphor at all. Some of it is metaphor, but a lot of it is not metaphor at all.
Yeah.
Which is funny. Which is good.
It's stuff that's just going to happen.
Literally. And she sort of dismisses it because she just didn't really know what she wasn't sure she was a dreamer yet.
This whole business of her being a dreamer versus Teleon Riyadh later on, when
it's problematic for sure.
Yeah, it is a little problematic because, the dreamers later, when this is more developed, it's like, well, being able to walk into Teleon Riyadh, that's what a dreamer really is. This is something kind of different, though.
This is more like foretelling almost.
Right.
Really. Anyway, so the next thing that happens is Elsie Grinwell comes in and tells them that where the Black Aja's belongings are. They're hidden. That the Black Aja had left, basically the 13 who left the tower had left some belongings. And Egwene realizes something is up, but Elsie gives her the slip. But of course, it wasn't really Elsie there, and it wasn't really Elsie that Matt saw.
Right.
I think it's pretty clear. I don't know. Should we get into this now? Is this spoilery?
Yeah. No.
I don't think so. I think this is pretty clear that Elsie Grinwell at this point is Lanfear.
Yes. Because she runs into Lanfear, doesn't she? Right after.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. She sees a beautiful woman and doesn't know who she is, and she's kind of arrogant and says she's not Aes Sedai, etc. We know it's Selene. But yeah, she is there instead of Elsie, and so she's. But Lanfear, of course, still manages to give Egwene the slip after imparting the knowledge that the Black Aja have left some things, some clues, perhaps that they can go check out. So Elaine and Egwene, Nynaeve, go look at what the Black Aja left. And this is funny. They basically both say Lumos. I mean, it's not really, but they have like the floating ball of light. It just makes me think of Lumos from Harry Potter.
Yes.
Which also brings up an interesting point to me. There aren't a lot of wands in this series for a series about so much magic. I think that Swan uses an Angreal or a Sangreal that is wand-like when healing Matt. But it's just incidentally wand-like. It's not like wands are an important thing. It just, it could have been shaped like a fat little man, like Angreal. It just happens to be a wand. So she's like I can imagine her conducting a little bit,
Well, I think the same... I think the same Angreal or whatever I think it's the same one that Egwene grabs later in the series. And I think at that point it's more almost referred to as like a staff.
You could see how he could have gone the direction of Angreal's being wands, just being a more powerful way to focus your magic, but it's just not a direction he went, which is fair. It's fine. It changes the whole feel of how the thing could have gone in a good way. I think, wands are fine. They're well done in Harry Potter, as opposed to that terrible Will Smith Netflix movie, Bright, where wands are like a nuclear weapon kind of, and it's confusing. I don't know. Yeah, they can be done terribly and they can be done well. So they go to the spot where all the Black Aja stuff is, and it's like a bunch of clothes and stuff, but it's all
basically
like
a big sign that says we're headed to Tyr.
Go to Tyr. This is where we're going. We've got the Lonely Planet Guide to Tyr and like a map of Tyr and what fun things to do in Tyr.
Exactly. It's like the Zagat Guide to Tyr.
Right. Exactly.
Printed out MapQuest directions to Tyr.
Very much so.
Okay. I think they're headed to Tyr.
It seems like it's a possibility at this point. So, of course, that begs the question, is that where Lanfear wanted them to go? Sure seems that way, because we later find out that Swan had no idea that there was more stuff. They didn't have any more stuff. It was probably planted. It begs the question, why would Lanfear tell them to go to Tyr? It seems likely at this point that she, just like in the last book, is helping Rand. She is playing both sides, clearly. She wants him to come over to the Great Lord of the Dark, but she doesn't want him to be killed by Ishmael either. Yeah. She's like, I will send him reinforcements kind of thing.
To be fair to the narrative at this point, the girls and Swan, they all think it's a trap.
Yeah, right. Which they should, of course, because obviously Swan didn't know anything about all this stuff that the Black Aja had left, if it is in fact the Black Aja stuff. So it's fair to say it's a trap, but they also know they should go. It's like, even if it is a trap, they should spring it. After this is when we actually get Egwene's first real venture into the world of dreams. So it's probably good we can dive into it a little bit more here. We've talked about it some here and there, but diving into just what the world of dreams is. First off, it's interesting to me that channelers can still channel there in the world of dreams in Teleran Riyadh. However, it isn't necessarily the most powerful thing you can do there. And there are people who can't channel, like some of the wise ones, or who can channel very little, who are much more powerful in Teleran Riyadh than maybe the most powerful channeler in the waking world. It's an interesting conundrum, and as we've said, it isn't necessarily well developed in this book. It gets more well developed in later books, but we do start to see it here a little bit, kind of talking about the way the world of dreams works. Egwene encounters Perrin with Hopper the Wolf, and then possibly most problematically, Rand, who doesn't seem to know he's in the world of dreams. And is he? I don't know. He's been fighting there. Apparently, he's been seeing visions. Did she enter his dreams? Was it actually the world of dreams? Yeah, it's a problematic scene.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I can figure is that when we get more info about Tai'Shar, it's clear that regular non-dreamer people go in and out of Tai'Shar all the time. Now, normally they don't stay long. It's kind of like they appear for a few moments.
Sure. And maybe Rand is an exception as the most powerful Taviran, the most Taviran alive now, that he could, pull Egwene into his dreams, perhaps, but it seems sort of seamless. So I just don't think that was totally thought out at that point, perhaps,
right?
Like we were talking about. But okay, perhaps most importantly, who is Sylvie?
Okay,
this is a fun one.
Read through this 3 times, and I was just like, this makes no sense to me. I don't know who this is supposed to be.
Right.
I'm just going to look it up on the Wikia.
Right. Me too. That's exactly what I did.
So when you look up Sylvie, you get taken to whose page?
Lanfear. Absolutely. Which I guess that's true. I mean, reading it again, I can see how that's true. But reading it without the prior knowledge, it's like, okay, what is happening now? Excuse me. Who is this random old lady? But reading it again, okay, maybe so.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Somewhere else in this book, by the way, someone does say that Ishamael and Lanfear are the 2 most powerful of the Forsaken.
Dreamers. Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they're, certainly Lanfear is a very powerful dreamer.
Uh-huh.
And she's even called, what's her name? The Knight.
Oh, shoot. Ishmael's the betrayer of hope, and she's the
daughter of the night or something.
Yeah, something like that. That sounds right. Yeah. I think Mogadine is portrayed as the most powerful in the world of dreams. Yeah,
definitely. Or Mogideon, or whichever one they went with, depending upon which one you're listening to.
Fair. Actually, I always had Mogideon in my mind. And I thought they in the book I listened to, they said Mogadine, so I kind of went with Mogadine. But I like Mogadine better. Honestly.
Yes, they swap.
Dang.
To Mogideon later, and which looks like Mogideon when you see it.
Yeah, it really does, and it bothered me the first time I heard it. So I'm glad to hear that they came around to the truth.
Lanfear, by the way, I looked it up. Lanfear is daughter of the night, and
good.
So the wolves call her Moonhunter.
Oh wow, interesting.
Yeah, that's her. Moonhunter is her name from the wolves.
So I did dig into this a little bit too on that. So I went to the wiki and I found some discussion board where generally people said it was Lanfear, but 1 or 2 people, this was interesting to me, argued that it was Varen. And you could almost see that, except for the fact that Sylvie talks about the Great Lord and says Ishmael is a fool. So it's like, okay, well, Varen wouldn't say Ishmael's a fool. And that seems like something that Lanfear would say, although there was one other person that was arguing passionately for it being Bella. But anyway, which I like that. That's my favorite.
Any theory that involves Bella is going to...
It's a good theory, for sure.
Yes.
So Egwene, of course, meets Sylvie in the Stone of Tyr. She basically is like floundering about in Tai'Shar and says, take me to where I need to be. And then she's in the Stone of Tyr, which is interesting. And Sylvie shows her Kalendor. And so she tries to probe it with the power and discovers that the shield is made by all of the elements of the one power and both Saidar and Saidin. And so it would be really interesting to know the story of how that thing got put there. The sword and the stone. Which is a little on the nose there, Robert Jordan.
Yes. Well,
you're gonna pull the sword out of the stone there.
We haven't even talked about this. So the sword and the stone, I honestly didn't catch for a while.
I didn't either. But he doesn't go at it directly. But once you start to think, wait a minute,
there's a little bit like the last scene in The Usual Suspects, where you drop the coffee cup and you see that everything was on the bulletin board behind you the whole time. I realized, I'm like, okay, Rand, Arthur, and
oh my gosh, what? I'd never heard that.
Tom,
that's crazy.
Merlin.
Oh my gosh, what?
Guinevere, like they're
okay. I thought I was being clever by noticing the Sword in the Stone, but none of those had ever remotely crossed my mind.
And I mean, those were just the ones that
I'm sure there are many more.
Yeah, there's probably several more, but you're like, oh my goodness. And as you think about the whole business of like us, we're in the first stage. This is the third age. It's like, okay, well, maybe the idea is that Arthur was a reincarnation of Luce Theron.
Sure. You can take that pretty far. Yeah, absolutely.
Good fun with that.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's fun. That's a fun little.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sword in the Stone. Yeah, we were properly introduced to Kalendor. Really, I mean, it better be. Look like glass, just like pure glass.
That's a sword that is not a sword. A sword that cannot be touched.
Yes, I want to see a sword that looks like it's made of crystal, where it's just totally transparent.
I agree. So Egwene wakes up and kind of freaks out and tells the rest of them what's going on. So they decide, all right, well, we probably should go to Tyr. We just got back here, but we got to go to Tyr. This is important. So Elaine says, I should probably tell my mom. She's going to be mad and worried.
Right.
So they decide to send Matt to Camelin with a letter to Morgaze. So it's like, so we get our second little mini quest here. Merry adventures, adventuring out of Tar Valon. So they go to Matt and say, please take this letter to Andor, to Camelin, so that Elaine's mom won't worry about her. Matt says, I can't leave because the guards won't let me. And they said, well, what if we had a way? And they produced one of the letters that the Amerlin seat gave them. It says, anything that is done by the bearer of this letter is my word, and let him do it. And so Matt is very grateful. He's like, all right, yeah, I'll do that. And Matt says, well, yeah, I'll help you guys out anytime you need it. And they kind of laugh at him, which is ironic given the second half of this book.
Yes. More times further on in. So,
yeah, exactly. So essentially they set Matt on his path for the rest of this book. They're going to help him essentially get out. Then I think this is the first time we meet Laris, the cook, the head of the White Tower kitchen.
Yes, the mistress of the kitchens.
Mistress of the kitchens, indeed. Amerlin comes to the kitchens, and that's when they realize that Elsie was not sent by the Amerlin seat to tell them, and that's when they realize this is probably a trap, but yeah, I think we're gonna have to do it anyway.
Yeah. Also, Swan says we burned everything that we found that had to do with the Black Aja. So either that was all planted by the Black Aja or by Lanfear, we don't know. Right. So it's either a trap or Lanfear is sending them there. Either way, there's some malicious intent involved. It's pretty clear.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed. So then we get back to Matt, and he goes gambling while he's kind of, feverish. Yes. Wins a whole lot of cash, goes from being broke to being just, he's got the dice rattling around in his head, and he feels his luck on, but he's definitely still not fully well. He has a lot of little mini adventures, kills a gray man by falling on top of him. Probably a gray man. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was a gray man. Bumps into Tom, who is very drunk. Because, he's lost his lady love, and he's just kind of like drunkenly playing at this inn. And but this is fun. He convinces Tom to go with him because he tells him he's going to Camelin, and Tom's like, that sounds like it's exactly what would fit my mood. Let's go visit my ex.
Yes, I'm in a masochistic mood.
I'll get clapped in irons, maybe executed or whipped or something. Sure, let's do it.
Yes.
So they head for the docks and look for the first ship out. And I figure this is like 4:00 in the morning or something,
Yeah.
And then like Tom sort of sobers himself up a little bit, and then they're on their way, allegedly.
I was going to mention when he is struggling with the gray man, that it's the first time that Matt says it's time to toss the dice.
Ah, yes. Varen has said that before, but
Right.
yeah, but not Matt. Right. Yeah. And I think it came up at least one other place. I can't remember. Somebody else said it.
He says it, and then I just realized, because this what I said wasn't totally accurate. So earlier, when he was fighting Glad and Gowan, right before he does that, he says for the first time, it's time to toss the dice. And that's when the warder who's standing by turns to him and says, "Oh, you speak the old tongue." And he didn't even realize he had said it in the old tongue.
Right.
Then
he'd done that a few times before, yeah.
Then he runs into the gray man, and when he's about to come after him, he shouts again, "It's time to toss the dice." And it says that the man looked confused, indicating once again he said it in the old tongue without meaning to.
And so then that begs the question of, do gray men get confused, and is that actually a gray man? I just don't picture gray men as showing a lot of emotion.
Right. Yeah. Well,
kind of like fast moving zombies, kind of.
Yeah. It would hurt the whole business of them not being noticeable.
It's true. It's true.
I like the one. I think Egwene comments when we first get introduced to him, to a gray man, that I wouldn't have picked him out of a lineup of 3 or something.
Sure.
It
reminds me of Matt Damon in Ocean's 11. Yeah. He's like supposed to be just completely nondescript in his discussions.
I think Brad Pitt's character says to him, they have to like you and then immediately forget about you.
There it is. Exactly. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So I think that brings us pretty much to the end of this, of our half, I would say, roughly.
Yes.
I do have a few other off-topic things and a spoiler or two. At least one spoiler. If we want to, do you want to do spoilers first?
Let's talk spoilers first. So
spoilers, please. Do you have
spoilers? Yeah. So if you're on your first read through and you're trying to avoid spoilers, then we are
going to talk about spoilers.
Yeah, and you can join us next week.
So I wanted to talk about Lanfear a little more, and I just think it's funny, having finished book 5, how Lanfear seems 100% on Rand's side, or mostly, other than you're trying to convert him to the Dark One bit. But against the other Forsaken, against the Black Aja, she's, throughout this book, she seems on his side. She's trying to help him until she finds out that he slept with Avienda.
Yes.
And then then she goes full berserker and tries to kill him and everyone else.
Right.
Oh, it's just funny. She blows this tinker or whatever, peddler cart apart and just where is he?
Yeah.
He slept. Where is that hoe bag or whatever?
Yeah. Well, it is funny because, throughout this book, we get this picture of a very calculating kind of
sure.
implacable kind of character. And so for her to suddenly kind of
just blow her cover like that,
it is kind of funny. And I think
and it's her downfall.
Yeah. And that there's this whole thing where it was definitely implied that Lanfear is one of the most powerful of the Forsaken, but Lews Therin is her weakness ultimately.
Clearly that is true. Yeah, that does seem to be exactly the case, because throughout this book, she's clearly not working with the Black Aja. She's clearly not working with Ishmael, at least not directly. She's working against him. As much as anything else. And we see that again next book as well. And literally up until the point where she finds out about, Avienda and Rand in the igloo or whatever.
Yeah.
she's with him, and then she decides she's going to kill him and everyone he loves, especially Avienda.
Yes.
Anyway, I just thought that was fun.
We talked about the last 2 times just how, of course, Shiriam shows up again and these, different points. And it's kind of interesting to consider the fact that she's Black Aja, the fact that Alviarin just happens to walk by at the moment that Egwene is talking to Alana and Shiriam.
Sure, these chapters read so differently knowing who is a dark friend. Who is Black Aja. Really do. Very differently, for sure.
Yeah. Alana is kind of an interesting character to read from this end of things too, because of course she ends up forcefully bonding Rand and then becoming a pretty important part of the last battle because of the fact that she bonded Rand. She is lying wounded there,
right,
towards the end, because as we discover later, when a bonded man, when his bond is forcefully removed, he can go crazy into this kind of rage,
right, which is why Moraine passes her bond with Lan on to Morel, because she knew she was going to die fighting Lanfear, of course, and she didn't want Lan to just go crazy and die. She wanted it better for him, I guess. So she could have passed the bond to Nynaeve, but didn't want to do that.
Yeah, she's still enough of a company woman to not pass a bond to somebody who's not an official Aes Sedai yet. I think that was
that's a good way to put it. It wasn't necessarily personal, right? That's a good point. Yes. If Nynaeve had been a full Aes Sedai, maybe she would have.
Maybe
more likely.
That's why. I mean, I do love the scene later. When finally Nynaeve wakes Morel up in the middle of the night to make her pass the bond.
Yeah, that is a good one. That is a good one. I enjoy it.
She's like, I passed the test. Give me his bond. And she's like, we'll do it tomorrow. And she's like, no.
Do it now.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading those later books. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Do you have any other spoilers, or
I think there were some that I'm forgetting about now, that when I re-listen to this, I'll go, oh yeah, that was one I wanted to talk about.
We'll get to it next episode then, because we'll still be on this book.
Well, I was just going to mention, in regards to Teleon Riyadh, just how later on, of course, we find out that it's where the Heroes of the Horn all go.
Right. Yeah, that's so weird. Birgitta. I can never remember to say that. Birgitta is there, and of course we have a whole lot of scenes with her, with Nynaeve, and she gets kicked out of Teleron Riyadh, and Gadol Kane is with her, but it's like, okay, where are the rest of them though? I guess Teleron Riyadh is just really big, so they can just sort of stay out of sight, and they're really good at staying out of sight. I think that Birgitta says that at one point, that they're good at just avoid. They're like experts at Teleron Riyadh, essentially. They live there, but it is a sort of a weird, like, what do they do all day? I can't imagine, Birgitta and Gadol Kane just sitting there eating a sandwich or
right, Regash Eagle Eye.
Yeah, right. I just wonder what they do with their time. I mean, other than spy on the Forsaken, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, interesting. Like, it just gets back to that. What is everyone doing off camera? Kind of.
It just, to me, illustrates. I think that's one of those things that he didn't have in mind with this early version of Teleon Riyadh. I don't think he had that in there yet. Because
I agree.
Later on, it's very clear that like dreams of the average person are totally separate from Teleon Riyadh. Like, you can access dreams through Teleon Riyadh, but they are a separate thing.
Right.
And
you can get pulled into someone's dream if they're a powerful dreamer, or if someone can enter your dreams forcefully, as you see with some of the Dark Friends, the Forsaken go in and pull them out. Right. And that's where Moraine says you need to like guard your dreams, is like Moraine says.
Yeah, Grandal, it's the dreams of the five captains later. So.
Right. True. Very good. Good point.
So to confuse the strategy during the last battle.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to mention Matt's involuntary humming is something that I hadn't.
Yeah. And Lews Therin does that too.
Yeah, that's true.
In Rand's head, Lews Therin does that. Tunelessly.
When Matt wakes up and realizes he's in the White Tower, he starts humming something called Down at the Bottom of the Well.
Oh, and yeah.
When he gets handed the Amerlin's letter to let him get off of Tarvalon, he starts humming something called Pocket Full of Gold.
Right. And then later we get Dance with Jack of the Shadows, which is always, that's like my favorite, I think.
Yeah.
Well, there's also Jack of the Mists. There's a few Jack of those. It's just kind of a fun little thing that happens. I don't know what exactly Jack of the Shadows is. I guess the Reaper.
Reaper. I always figured, Jack of the Shadows was like death or.
Yeah, sure. The Jack of the Mist is just the patron of fog. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there's fog and wind and every sorts of evil thing. So
fair enough.
Maybe Jack of the Mists is the like friendly cousin to Machin Shin and whatever the one in Shadar Logoth was called.
Mashadar.
Mashadar is in Shadar Logoth.
There you go.
Anyway, okay. So what was your off-topic thing?
So I ended up on the wiki page for Jordan, and I knew he had written some Conan the Barbarian novels in the 80s, but I didn't realize how many. He wrote a bunch of them.
Oh, wow.
Apparently he got the gig because they needed someone who this blew my mind, who could write a novel quickly.
Yeah.
And he pumped one of those Conan novels out in 13 days.
Oh, wow.
Eat your heart out, George R. R. Martin. That's all. I just love that he wrote a bunch of Conan novels. It was like 5 or 6 of them, maybe more. But he also said that he wanted to do another series when he was done with Wheel of Time called Infinity of Heaven. Of course, he didn't get a chance to do that because he died. But he said it was going to be more limited in scope, like 6 books, 2 trilogies. And it's just like, man, send the notes from that to Brandon Sanderson. I really want to know what was up with that. It sounds interesting.
Yeah. You wonder if
totally different series.
Yeah. You wonder how much of a outline, if he had written any of it down, if any of that exists.
He expressed a lot of interest in getting to it. Like he was anxious to get finished with the Wheel of Time was taking a lot longer than he expected. Kind of like George R. R. Martin, honestly, but he just never got a chance to get around to it. It's a good question.
I believe that covers all for this episode. If we didn't cover some other news that's come out about the TV show or otherwise, it's because we did record this a few weeks back. So sorry about that. If you want to complain at us, we would love to hear you complain.
Please do. Yeah.
Just go to soundcloud.com/Tai'Shar and tell us about how wrong we are about everything. Just
definitely
go ahead and correct our pronunciation on whatever this thing or that thing is. And let us know if you have any questions or things that you'd like to hear discussed, or if you just want to argue. We'd love to hear from you. That's soundcloud.com/Tai'Shar. On Apple Podcasts, you can always like and rate us and share with everybody else and give us a review on there to let us know how we're doing. Once again, we're still awaiting the 1-star review. So
yeah, please bring it.
We'll see if that happens between now and next time we post. So next time we're going to be going into the 3rd quarter of Dragon Reborn. Looking forward to finishing up this book. I really, the second half, man, I mean, kind of takes off like cannon.
It picks up a lot. Yeah. Like we said before, there's a lot of Aes Sedai White Tower intrigue in the first half. Not necessarily uninteresting, but not a lot happens. I mean, you'll have whole chapters you can sum up with a sentence. And then, like you said, it does take off after that.
Right. So I'll be looking forward to talking about that with you. Well, until next time, Tai'Shar.